occurred near the Dull Robinson Zook Road area as the F4 tornado crossed through, and there was a couple in the upper portion of their home. And as this tornado approached, the husband attempted to cover his wife, who was wheelchair bound. And as he was doing this, the home was hit, and he was killed by flying debris. And his wife was sent to the hospital and survived. The other one was near the cinemas where the theater was struck, and again a car was swept off the road and the driver inside was killed. But really the most tragic one would have to be the event that occurred there at the Dull Robinson Zook Road. But when I go to Van Wert County, I always run across somebody and we talk at length about this. So even to this day, we're still having people talk about the impact of that particular event of November 10th.
2 more lives were lost near Continental, Ohio, when a tornado hit a mobile home. As more than a dozen tornadoes spun across parts of Ohio, one F3 turned deadly near the town of Republic. 1 person was killed and 2 others were injured when a home was swept off its foundation.
The word widespread may not completely define the multiple severe weather outbreaks going on all at once on November 10, 2002. Further south, more tornadoes were underway in Tennessee. 15 tornadoes to be exact, including F3 damage from a twister that struck in the evening, killing 4 and injuring 18.
33 homes and mobile homes were destroyed, with 128 homes and mobile homes damaged. All 4 fatalities occurred exactly where officials say never to ride out storms, in a mobile home.
And there were more. David Holtz at the National Weather Service in Morristown, Tennessee, was a radar operator that evening.
Yeah, that day it really started out across Middle Tennessee. We had a series of what we call tornadic supercells. They were just kind of long-duration supercells. And these storms, as we moved into the evening hours, progressed eastward into the plateau counties. This is kind of like, it was generally kind of late evening, I'd say right around 8 o'clock or so. And these tornadoes went into Morgan County, and there's specifically 2 areas that got hit the hardest. One was the Mossy Grove area, and also was the Petros area, Morgan County. We had several fatalities. But also, Morgan County itself, it's a very mountainous area, and a lot of times, people kind of get a false sense of security in the mountains when it comes to tornadoes, and then they kind of dissipated as they went into the Tennessee Valley. So it was definitely a very memorable couple hours there as we worked through that event.
Following the F3 tornado that hit Mossy Grove and Petros Joyner in Morgan County, Tennessee, 7 people lost their lives. Dave Holtz believes advanced warning may have kept that number from being higher.
We hate to see fatalities and across the area, but due to the longevity of these storms and the fact they were moving from Middle Tennessee into our region, and just a very pronounced storms. Because of that, we had the ability to put out a fairly long lead time, as you mentioned, as it moved into Morgan County. It was right around 30 minutes lead time that we was able to get the tornado warning out before the actual tornadoes occurred. But during that whole event, even leading up to the evening hours, we knew there was going to be a fairly big tornado outbreak across the Tennessee Valley. So even prior to that day, we was able to talk to the emergency managers and the local officials and law enforcement, and just kind of give them a feel for this is going to be a big day, a big evening, and just prepare for this. But again, it's the fact that we had fatalities is something that we definitely take to heart here at the Weather Service.
As tornadoes were spinning across the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, yet another outbreak of severe weather was underway further south in Mississippi. 3 different tornadoes moved through the Lowndes County area on the evening of Sunday, November 10th. The third, rated as an F1, and claimed a life near Crawford. The victim was a 54-year-old man who left his home to warn neighbors of the approaching tornado. He was on his way home when his trailer flipped over, pinning him to the ground.
Of the 15 twisters in Mississippi, the strongest struck the city of Columbus. Dozens of homes and businesses, as well as a church, suffered F3 damage. At the church in Columbus, about 60 people were moved from an activities building into hallways after learning of the tornado warning. The roof of the activities building collapsed just minutes later. There were no fatalities in Columbus.
Residents were not so lucky in Alabama. The perfect atmospheric setup was in place in the south, much like it was over a large part of the eastern U.S. Jerry Tracy is the meteorologist at WVTM-TV in Birmingham and remembers it well.
Well, one of the things I remember about that day is that sometimes this happens before a tornado event. If you have kind of a capped atmosphere, you'll have a pretty clear sky for much of the period until things get going. And I remember that day being, number one, so warm outside. I can't remember the exact high temperature, but I think it was like 81 or 82. And the sky was just sunny. And it was a day in which, from a casual view of the weather, you would say, well, it's a nice day. It's an unusually warm day, but it's a nice day outside. And then all of a sudden, early evening, things began to happen. And that's when you realize the event that you thought might happen really is coming to pass. And it was a day, I believe, in the morning in which we were upgraded to a high risk from the Storm Prediction Center. And obviously, high-risk days you always take very seriously. You make sure the staffing level is where it needs to be. You make sure the news director and everybody else is on hand and knows exactly what's going to happen, or at least what potentially could happen. And so much of the day ahead of time was spent in figuring out just where are we going to be when this thing gets going. And then into the event that evening, everything happened very quickly, and it wasn't a particularly long event, and unlike some of ours, which occur in two phases, this one pretty much occurred in one phase, and everything happened during the evening hours, I believe, between about 6:30 and about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And once it got going, it was very fast and furious, and unfortunately, there were two very strong tornadoes, the tracks of which were very close to one another. And that does happen once in a while in Alabama, and it happened in this one. Both storms originating, I believe, in Fayette County and then moving northeast of there.
Multiple tornadoes struck Alabama, affecting Carbon Hill and Saragossa.
And those were the two that tracked so close together, only a few miles apart, both in the origination point and in the actual tracks, although the second storm certainly did go a lot further. I believe its length was something like 75 miles on the ground. It was a very wide storm, too, 1,100 yards wide, or something just over 1,000. And that's the one that tracked from just northeast of the city of Fayette on up through Walker County and eventually up into Coleman County, too. That was the longest track we dealt with that day. But the other F3 was just on the north side of that one, not as long, but starting in about the same place and winding up in southeastern sections of Winston County near the community of Arley. And that one also causing fatalities. Both of those two storms caused fatalities. The first one, the relatively short one, was 4 fatalities, and the second one was 7.
In all, 3 different tornadoes claimed 12 lives in Alabama. With Veterans Day on Monday, November 11th, the mood was different than normal. Jerry Tracy says the community came together to not only recognize those who served our country, but those who suffered losses from the storm.
There were a lot occurring because it was Veterans Day, and in Birmingham we have one of the biggest Veterans Day parades in the country, and that occurred the next day. And obviously, a lot of what had been planned was changed because of this terrible event occurring the night before, and there was a lot of collection, collection of foodstuffs and things like that the next day to get out to these people who were in desperate need. I know as a TV station we were planning to do the parade live, and we still did, but your focus was not what it would have been. It would have been totally on the tremendous service that our vets do for us, but we also had to think about people who were suffering very badly in areas that were only a little bit west and especially northwest of the city of Birmingham. I remember a lot of people and a lot of groups coming together the next day on Veterans Day to say, let's get together here. These people need our help, and we have to give it to them.
Tornadoes occurring at a somewhat unusual time of year, November, and at night, likely resulted in the number of fatalities across all 4 outbreak regions that weekend. But in 2002, communication and technology were much different than today.
There was a real limit of instantaneous communications. We had internet, but we really didn't have a lot of the interfaces to directly and routinely remain in contact using internet. For many of the Weather Service offices, that was kind of an infancy for us. We were pushing stuff on the websites, but we weren't really actively integrating it in as a communications tool. We certainly had our amateur radio operators in place, and that's been a kind of a standard operating procedure ever since amateur radio has been on the air. There's been a connection there. But I think the real big difference is the ability to maintain instantaneous contact before, during, and after. We just did not have that full capability at that time. We were just starting to dabble in and explore the capabilities of the internet.
Jerry Tracy from WVTM TV agrees. Social media combined with real-time communication with the National Weather Service online has superseded the old way from 2002.
Mostly you had to do it by phone. That was the key way to get through. I mean, obviously you had other ways, such as their website, such as NOAA Weather Radio, to find out basic public information. But for behind the scenes much, and let's face it, they didn't have time to answer the phone during an event like that. We didn't have time to make the call during an event like that. Instant messaging gave us a way, or chat as we now call it, gave us a way to go back and forth with very little loss of time. And that's why it was so helpful. And it did start, I think it officially debuted, I think it was 2000. Like anything else, though, it probably didn't catch on a great deal instantly. And then once this event occurred, and during this event is when we all realized, man, what a great tool this is.
For those who work in emergency management, like Keith Hossman, he believes that you can't have too much warning when it comes to severe weather.
Weather radios, and of course back then they didn't have smartphones. Now everybody's got smartphones. There's no excuse and no reason for people to not have some way of getting notification, whether it be a weather radio, which are very inexpensive, $30 you can buy a weather radio. And people waste that much money a month, if not a week, on junk food, on alcohol and cigarettes and video games and movies and what have you. They set $5 a week aside. Out of that, they can pay for a weather radio in no time at all. They make great housewarming gifts. You know, somebody gets a new house, a new apartment, or whatever, buy them a weather radio. I'm a firm believer in people having that sort of tool at their disposal. I have 2 weather radios at my house, one downstairs and one upstairs. I don't like to be anywhere and not have some kind of notification of what's going on. It may save somebody's life.
Next on Tornado Talk, December 5th, 1953, a powerful F5 tornado rips through Vicksburg, Mississippi, killing 38. It is still to this day the 4th deadliest tornado to affect the state. December Disaster on episode 26 of Tornado Talk.